Wrong place, ma'am," he sneered. She didn't respond, just aimed, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. One perfect shot, one ruined ego, one secret unveiled. The Arlington Marksman Club wasn't just a shooting range, it was a shrine to the elite. Oak-paneled walls bore the names of champions, oil tycoons, politicians, and ex-military brass. It was where people didn't just aim for targets, they flexed status, lineage, and million-dollar endorsements. Julia Hart didn't belong here, at least not in their eyes. She stepped into the grand lobby in worn jeans, a faded navy cardigan and scuffed sneakers. Her brown hair was pulled back into a no-fuss ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, just a thin gold ring on her finger. Almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Behind the polished reception desk, Bertini flashed a platinum blonde front desk host, flashed a mechanical smile. Her eyes scanned Julia's appearance, with the subtle contempt of someone who'd grown up knowing which forks went where. "Hi there, I'd like to register for the open practice," Julia said calmly, her voice soft but clear. Brittany's smile tightened. "Open sessions are for members only, ma'am." Julia reached into her bag and pulled out a crinkled envelope. "I have a day pass, gifted to me." The name Michael Ray was scribbled on the note inside, a name that carried quiet weight in the right military circles. Brittany didn't seem to notice. She just gave a tight nod and buzzed Julia through. From the far end of the hall, Lucas Barrington spotted her immediately. He stood like a lion in his den, confident, tanned, and perfectly coiffed. He wore a tailored shooting vest with his initials monogrammed over his chest, and he was surrounded by a group of equally smug socialites. Lucas wasn't just any shooter. He was a 5-time national champion, a Remington sponsor, and the son of a Texas oil dynasty. His nickname among the club staff? The Face of Precision. His favorite sport wasn't shooting. It was humiliating people who didn't fit. As Julia walked toward the basic range lanes, Lucas leaned to his friend and chuckled. "Looks like someone wandered in from a coupon aisle." The laughter echoed across the room. Julia didn't flinch. She found an empty lane at the far end, laid her worn leather bag on the bench, and began unwrapping something from a soft cloth. Not a flashy custom pistol, not a chromed-out beast. Just a standard Glock 19. Clean, quiet, deadly in the right hand. That's when Wyatt, the young range technician, noticed her. He was maybe 22, still learning the ropes, and unlike the rest, he watched her without judgment. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in quiet curiosity. Lucas sauntered over, wearing that smug grin like a badge. "Ma'am," he said, overly polite. "This range is for real shooters, not craft fair attendees." Julia turned toward him, her eyes calm. "I'm just here to practice." "Oh, I see. Practice, like a hobbyist. All right then. How about this? 10 grand says you can't hit the bullseye from 50 yards. He grinned, turning toward the crowd that was now watching closely. "I don't have that kind of money," Julia replied evenly. Lucas stepped closer. "Fine. Let's make it fun. You hit the shot, I pay. You miss, you pack your things and never come back." The air shifted. Rebecca Jensen, the club's manager and a former national-level shooter herself, noticed the tension from across the room. She began to walk over, but Lucas raised a hand. "It's just a friendly wager," he said, not even looking at her. Julia looked down at her ring. Her thumb brushed across the worn engraving inside the band. Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. "All right." Lucas raised his arms theatrically. "Ladies and gentlemen, grab your drinks. We've got ourselves a show." What no one noticed, no one except Wyatt, was the way Julia stood. The way her spine lengthened, her shoulders squared, her breath slowed. The way she checked her grip. 3 points of contact, perfect alignment. It wasn't casual, it wasn't lucky. It was trained. Deeply trained. Wyatt swallowed hard, his instincts suddenly kicking in. He'd seen videos of military shooters before, watched documentaries on elite SEAL teams, read stories on people with impossible kill ratios. And something in the way this woman moved felt familiar, not practiced, programmed. She raised the Glock, leveled her arms, exhaled slowly. Like the moment the shot rang out, the laughter died. Everyone had expected a misfire, a flinch, a pathetic thud against a far-off cardboard edge. What they got instead was a crisp, clean crack. And silence so loud it echoed. Irinia's mechanical arm whirred, bringing the paper target slowly toward the onlookers. With every click forward, the tension thickened. The room held its breath. Dead center. Perfect bullseye. A hole no larger than a dime, punched straight through the heart of the target. Lucas's smirk faltered. Rebecca Jensen tilted her head, studying the woman at the end of the line. Wyatt's mouth was slightly open, his brow furrowed. Brittany, at the front desk, dropped her pen. Julia calmly lowered the Glock and placed it back on the table. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just stood in stillness, letting the room wrestle with what they'd seen. Lucas was the first to break. "Beginner's luck," he snapped. Too loud. Anyone can get lucky once. Rebecca stepped forward. "That was a textbook shot," she said, her voice neutral but laced with respect. "Miss Julia Hart," she replied simply. Lucas's jaw tightened. "Okay, Miss Hart, let's raise the stakes. You want to impress the crowd? Here's your chance. 75 yards, 3 shots, all bullseyes. You miss even once, you admit you cheated and leave for good." There was a collective inhale from the onlookers. This wasn't just posturing anymore. This was spectacle. "If you win," Lucas added, pulling out his checkbook like it was a weapon, 50 grand, to whatever veterans charity you want. Hell, I'll even announce it myself. Julia looked at him, then at the small gold ring on her finger. Her thumb brushed across it again. "I accept," she said quietly. "But if I win, the money goes to the Logan Hart Foundation. Veterans' Mental Health." Lucas blinked. "Logan Hart?" She didn't explain. From the back of the room, Michael Ray had just arrived. He stood silently in the corner, arms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. As Julia took her place at the 75-yard line, the room shifted. People who had rolled their eyes minutes ago were now inching forward. Rebecca stood near the monitors, watching the line data. Wyatt had his phone out, not to record but to text someone. "You need to get here, now." The first shot, bullseye, no hesitation. The second, a minor stance shift, perfect hit. By the third shot, Lucas was chewing his bottom lip. Julia paused. She twisted her ring once, inhaled slowly, then exhaled halfway through the trigger pull. Exactly how Logan had taught her. Crack, crack. The final target came back. 3 perfect holes in a perfect vertical line, the kind of grouping that made Olympic coaches drool. The crowd erupted. It was quiet at first, then built. Claps, cheers, stunned murmurs. Julia said nothing, just stepped back and retrieved her cloth. Lucas grabbed the target sheets like they might reveal a trick. No way. No damn way. Rebecca moved to intercept him. "You made a deal, Mr. Barrington. That was a clean set." "She's rigged something. No one walks in off the street and shoots like that." "That's not true." Wyatt muttered under his breath, loud enough for Rebecca to catch. Lucas turned to Julia, face twisted. You think you can come in here, take the spotlight, steal a championship legacy built over decades? I didn't come for your spotlight, Julia replied. I came to practice. You made it a performance. The words hit harder than any bullet. But Lucas wasn't done. Then prove it. 1 week from today. A full match. 10 stations. 10 weapons. Head-to-head, club equipment only. Real stakes, not some fluke stunt. Rebecca interjected. Mr. Barrington, that's not... Let her speak, Lucas barked. Julia looked around. Her chest rose and fell once. The old Julia. The accountant. The widow. The woman who hadn't touched a gun in years. Wanted to say no, walk away, disappear. But then she saw Wyatt. Rebecca. The young woman recording with tears in her eyes. Michael, in the corner, arms still crossed. And she felt Logan again. In her spine, in her stance, in her silence. I accept, she said. Lucas smirked. And when I win, you admit publicly that you cheated. And when I win, Julia countered. You double the donation. Lucas's nostrils flared. Deal. As the crowd slowly dispersed, the buzz had already begun. Phones rang, social media caught fire, video clips looped and reshared. Mystery woman hits impossible shot, one headline read. Champion humiliated at Arlington, read another. But what none of them knew, what even Julia didn't yet realize, was that Lucas wasn't going to rely on skill alone. He was already making calls. That night, Lucas Barrington paced the marble floors of his penthouse overlooking the Potomac, phone glued to his ear. His voice was sharp, desperate beneath the practiced calm. Dig deeper, he hissed. I want everything on Julia Hart. Where she trained, who trained her, if she has military ties. Hell, find out where she buys her socks. Nothing is off limits. On the other end of the line, his private investigator replied cautiously. She's clean, sir. Works as a senior accountant at Grant & Wiley. Moved to D.C. 3 years ago from Virginia Beach. No competitive shooting background, no social media, just normal. No one shoots like that and is normal. Keep digging, Lucas growled before slamming the phone down. Across town, Julia sat alone on her small balcony, tea in hand, staring at the stars. She hadn't fired a weapon in years. Not until today. Her hands weren't trembling, but her mind was a storm. The memory of Logan's last mission surfaced again. The knock on the door. The folded flag. The funeral with full honors. Commander Reese placing Logan's seal trident in her palm. He'd called you his calm, he'd said. You were his center. And his student. Her phone buzzed. A message from Michael. It's bigger than you think. He's going to come at you hard. Be ready. She texted back, I already started training. The next morning, Julia took sick leave from work and drove 2 hours to a remote outdoor range frequented by Special Forces retirees. She'd been here once, with Logan. They had carved their initials into one of the benches. They were still there, weathered but visible. For 8 hours, she trained. Not to impress, not to win, to remember. Every click of the magazine, every recoil, every breathing pattern. She wasn't relearning, she was awakening. At sunset, a shadow approached. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a simple ball cap and a calm demeanor that screamed military. Mrs. Hart? The man asked. She turned. Yes, Commander Reese. Logan was my teammate. We fought together in Fallujah. I heard what happened at Arlington. Thought you might want some pointers on the Macmillan TAC 338. Julia blinked, caught off guard. I didn't know he had a nickname. Reese smiled faintly. He didn't talk about himself, but everyone else did. Ghost wasn't just a name. He hit targets no one else saw, and he never missed. I remember him saying, "My wife's got steadier hands than half the SEALs I've trained." He wasn't joking. For the next 3 hours, Reese walked her through the Macmillan long range, scope adjustment, wind compensation. She took notes, but more importantly, she listened. Before he left, he handed her a weathered field notebook. His. Never left base without it. Calculations, adjustments, combat notes, and pages on you. She opened it. On one page, Julia, 50 yards, 9/10 bullseyes, calm, controlled, deadly. Better than half my team. She closed the notebook gently. You're not just showing up for yourself, Reese said before leaving. You're representing everything Logan stood for. Quiet excellence, precision under pressure. Remember that. That night, Lucas received a call from his investigator. We found something. Virginia Beach. She was married to a SEAL, Master Chief Logan Hart. KIA 3 years ago. Lucas froze. Wait. Logan Hart? The ghost? Confirmed. He didn't respond immediately. He just stared out the window, replaying her stance, her aim, the precision. She's not just some lucky civilian, he muttered. She's been trained by a legend. Jessica, his girlfriend, walked in. Babe, you okay? He turned to her. She's not who we thought. Jessica frowned. Then don't go through with it, call it off. Lucas shook his head slowly. It's too late. She accepted. If I back down now, I lose more than a competition. I lose face, reputation, legacy. But inside, a different fear had started to form. One he'd never felt before. Because for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure he could win. Competition day arrived like a storm. The Arlington Marksman Club had never seen such a crowd. The board had allowed limited press access and opened the viewing gallery to the public. Folding chairs filled every inch of the indoor observation deck. Live monitors streamed every angle. The air buzzed with tension and curiosity. Julia arrived in the same simple outfit, navy button-down, straight-leg jeans, hair tied back. The only difference today was the duffel bag she carried. Inside, Logan's notebook and a carefully folded American flag. Rebecca Jensen met her privately near the equipment staging area. Her voice, low, almost apologetic. Julia. There are some inconsistencies in the setup. Trigger weights on certain firearms feel off. Not enough to disqualify. But they're not standard. Julia nodded once. Understood. No one officially reported them, Rebecca added, her gaze drifting toward Lucas's entourage. But someone clearly wanted you uncomfortable. Won't be the first time, Julia said calmly. Lucas arrived shortly after, surrounded by handlers and photographers. He wore a black and gold jacket with his name stitched across the back, sunglasses despite the indoor lighting. His handshake with Julia was limp, performative. Hope you slept well, he sneered. Pressure can be tough for amateurs. Julia met his gaze evenly. My husband taught me how to handle pressure. His smile froze just slightly. The match began. Station after station, Lucas delivered what he always did. Flawless technique, sharp reflexes, total confidence. The crowd clapped politely. He was good, no one denied that. But Julia? Julia moved differently. Where Lucas flared, she focused. Where he posed, she planted. At Station 3, she adjusted mid-burst after a misaligned sight. At Station 4, she adapted to a rifle with a heavier pull, using Logan's calculations. She didn't panic. She processed. The tension began to shift. By Station 6, murmurs spread through the audience. She's consistent. Her grouping is surgical. That's military training. Michael Ray sat quietly in the back row with 3 other men, former teammates of Logan. None of them said a word, but their faces told the story. That's her. At Station 7, Julia briefly faltered. The weapon jammed. Lucas smirked. "Need help?" he called out. She cleared it, reset, and still scored higher. By Station 8, the scores were neck and neck. Lucas's lead had evaporated. Sponsors in his booth shifted uncomfortably. Journalists exchanged glances. The headlines were writing themselves. Before Station 9, Lucas approached Julia at the prep table. His tone was quieter, colder. "Impressive so far. You've got the ghost's discipline. He taught you well." The mention of Logan's call sign hit like a fist. Julia looked up slowly. "You did your homework," she said. Lucas leaned in. "I always do." She held his gaze. "Then you know he believed in integrity above all else." Lucas's smile thinned. "We'll see who still believes in that when it's over." They walked to Station 10. The final challenge, the Macmillan TAC 3 through 38. Each competitor had 10 shots. Each shot would be evaluated not only on accuracy, but on grouping, recoil management, and timing. A perfect round required precision few could sustain under pressure. Lucas went first. His shooting was tight, calculated. 9 of 10 shots clustered in the inner ring, 1 slightly wide. It was a performance. Then Julia stepped up. She placed Logan's notebook on the bench beside her, flipped to a bookmarked page, and scanned the wind formulas. She adjusted the scope. Her movements were calm, measured. Her breath, steady. First shot, bullseye. Second, dead center. By the 6th, the crowd had gone completely silent. On the 7th shot, a glint of light, just a flicker, reflected from a polished surface near Lucas's sponsor box. It flashed across Julia's scope. She paused, blinked once. Reset. Then she twisted her ring. The old signal between her and Logan. Calm is a weapon. The final 3 shots were executed with surgical precision. Bullseye, bullseye. When the results flashed across the screen, Julia Hart, 10/10, perfect grouping. The room erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, whistles. Reporters scrambled for photos. Rebecca's hands were trembling as she confirmed the scores. Lucas, stone-faced, approached the center stage. "This isn't over," he muttered. "For today it is," Julia replied. "And you owe $50,000 to the Logan Hart Foundation." But Lucas didn't hand over the check. Instead, he exploded. "This whole thing was rigged. There's no way she outshot me clean. She's been training in secret. That notebook, those calculations, that's unfair advantage." The room fell into shocked silence. Then Rebecca stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Actually, Mr. Barrington, the only unfair advantage was yours." She tapped the screen. Security footage rolled. It showed a member of Lucas's team entering the equipment room after hours, adjusting scopes, swapping springs. Gasps rippled through the audience. Every firearm Julia used was subtly sabotaged, and she still won. Lucas's face drained of color. "You didn't just lose," Rebecca said softly. "You got beat, clean, and that's what scares you most." The footage played again, slower this time. Zoomed in, clear as day, Lucas's technician removing a spring from a trigger assembly, swapping parts, testing tension. The reaction from the crowd shifted from awe to disgust. "Mr. Barrington," Rebecca continued, her voice calm but firm, "the club's bylaws strictly prohibit any interference with standardized competition equipment. Tampering constitutes grounds for disqualification, suspension, and in some cases, criminal investigation." A wave of whispers swept through the audience, reporters already typing headlines, board members exchanging grave looks. Lucas tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The swagger was gone. All that remained was exposed ego, naked, trembling, cornered. "Let me explain," he said, stepping forward. "I didn't know he was doing that. I didn't ask for it." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Then how did you know exactly which rifles she would struggle with?" No answer. Michael Ray stood now, walking down from the back of the room. His voice carried, cool and commanding. "I served with Logan, and I saw this woman fire under wind, pressure, and chaos. She didn't flinch then. She didn't flinch now. You tried everything to break her. She still outshot you." Lucas's fists clenched. His face flushed red. "You're all falling for a narrative. Military widow beats arrogant champion. It sells well, doesn't it? What about everything I've built? What about my legacy?" Julia stepped forward, her voice steady. "Legacies aren't built by clinging to trophies. They're built by who you become when the spotlight turns away. I didn't come here to take your title. I came to keep a promise." The room fell still. She continued, "My husband once told me, excellence is quiet. Ego shouts. Don't ever confuse the two." A pause, then someone in the back started clapping. Then more. The room rose to its feet. It was over. Later that evening, video clips flooded social media. Julia's perfect sequence at the TAC 3038, the sabotage footage, the final quote. Hashtags trended. Quiet excellence. Logan Hart Foundation. Real shooter wins. One account posted, "She didn't just outshoot him." By morning, Lucas's sponsors had issued public statements. Several terminated their contracts. The club announced an emergency ethics review, and the Logan Hart Foundation reported a wave of new donations. In a quiet conference room the next day, Lucas sat across from Julia and her legal advisor. He looked older, smaller. "I'll make the donation," he said. $100,000, double the agreed amount. "And I'll accept a 3-year competition suspension." Julia nodded. "And the public apology?" Lucas hesitated, then exhaled. "It'll be authentic." As he stood to leave, he looked back once. "For what it's worth, you're the finest shooter I've ever competed against." Julia met his eyes one last time. "Logan would have said I was always good. He just helped me remember." 2 weeks later, Julia stood inside a different kind of shooting range. No digital leaderboards, no velvet ropes, no brand-sponsored rifles. Just 6 folding tables, a stack of paper targets, and a group of veterans quietly waiting to begin. The room was part of the newly launched Logan Hart Veteran Resilience Center, funded entirely by donations after Julia's story went viral, including the $100,000 0-cent settlement from Lucas Barrington. The walls were painted military gray. On one of them hung a framed photo of Logan in uniform. Beneath it, a plaque. "Calm is a weapon." Julia faced the group. A former Army Ranger with a prosthetic leg. A young Marine battling anxiety. A Navy corpsman who hadn't spoken above a whisper in 3 months. She wasn't here as a champion. She wasn't even here as a shooter. She was here as someone who had survived something invisible and kept a promise. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was calm, stronger than it had been in years. "My name is Julia Hart. I'm not a soldier, I'm not a celebrity. But I learned how to shoot from someone who was both, And today, I want to teach you what he taught me. Silence. Then she picked up Logan's old Glock and placed it gently on the table. We're going to start small, no pressure, no scorecards, just breathing, focus, and standing your ground. She looked around. You don't need perfect hands. You just need a reason to steady them. Something shifted in the room. A few heads nodded. One of the vets, a wiry guy with sharp eyes, raised his hand. Did you really beat Lucas Barrington? Julia smiled softly. I didn't beat him. I outlasted him. The room chuckled, the tension cracked just enough for trust to walk in. Over the following weeks, Julia poured herself into the program, not as a showpiece, but as a presence. She listened more than she spoke, shared Logan's notes, let the trainees hold his medals, feel the weight of history, the silence behind every uniform. One afternoon, after a quiet training session, she sat alone at the range bench, flipping through Logan's notebook. On the final page, in fading ink, he had written, "If you're reading this, it means you're still fighting. Good. Stay calm. Keep breathing. They'll try to break your focus, but they can't take your center. That belongs to you. That's what I loved most about you." Julia closed the book, tears gathering but not falling. Later that night, she spoke at a fundraiser for the center. Year ago, she told the room, I walked into a shooting range for the first time in 3 years. I wasn't looking to compete. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to feel closer to someone I lost. She paused, looked out over the crowd of veterans, donors, and quiet supporters. But in doing so, I found something else. A new kind of mission. One where calm wins. Where silence speaks louder than applause, and where standing still is a kind of power. The room rose in applause, not out of celebration, but reverence. Julia stepped back from the podium. She didn't need to say more. Logan's legacy had already spoken through her. Months passed. The headlines faded. The sponsors moved on. Lucas Barrington's name quietly vanished from the competition circuit. He issued a public apology, scripted, distant, damage-controlled. But by then the world had already chosen whose story they remembered. Julia Hart never gave another press interview. She declined sponsorships, media tours, and even a book deal. Not because she was afraid of the spotlight, but because her mission had already shifted to something far more important. One afternoon, while locking up the training facility, she noticed something left behind. A paper target riddled with perfect groupings, signed only with a Sharpie. For Ghost. I finally found my calm. She folded it, placed it in Logan's notebook, and smiled. The Logan Hart Foundation continued to grow, not just in funding, but in impact. Veterans from across the country wrote in, shared their stories, sent photos of their own first bullseyes. A year after the competition, the foundation launched its first scholarship, the Ghost Award for Quiet Excellence in Marksmanship, given annually to a veteran who demonstrated not just skill, but restraint, focus, and integrity. At the first awards ceremony, Julia didn't speak until the very end. She walked to the podium holding a single item, Logan's ring, now worn around a chain on her neck. She looked out over the audience and said, "People often ask what it felt like to win that match. But what I remember most isn't the crowd, or the trophy, or even the shot itself. It's the silence just before the trigger. That moment when everything else falls away, and all that's left is who you are." She paused, and in that moment, I wasn't a widow. I wasn't a shooter. I was someone who kept a promise. The room stood, not out of obligation, but reverence. So, if you're ever dismissed, underestimated, or made to feel invisible. Remember this: your power isn't always in how loud you speak or how bright you shine. Sometimes, it's in how steady you stay when no one's watching. Sometimes, it's in how you aim. And if you felt something watching Julia's journey, if you believe stories like hers deserve to be told, remembered, and honored, then share this story. Because somewhere out there, someone quiet is watching. And they're steadier than you think.